Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Banda Global Forum. I'm Dr. Banda Khalifa, your host. Here, the world's sharpest minds in health, leadership, and education speak unfiltered. No sound bites, no spin, just real conversations that move systems and sharpen your strategy. So, most of our viewers and listeners are international medical graduates, believe it or not. So, today we are discussing a critical topic for international medical graduates and aspiring physicians, that is the US clinical residency. What strategies and what expectations that you should know. So, joining us today is an esteemed physician who is the chief of gastroenterology and the director of the gastroenterology fellowship program at New York City Health and Hospitals, Harlem, right in the heart of New York City. She has over 40 years of clinical experience. She specializes in gastroenterology and liver diseases. Beyond her extensive clinical practice, she serves as an assistant professor of medicine at Columbia University and has been nationally recognized, including as a top Black doctor by Castor Connolly in 2024. Dr. Culpepper-Morgan brings extensive experience mentoring medical residents and fellows, guiding them through the complexities of residency placements and professional expectations. So, in this conversation, we'll cover essential strategies for securing residency, understanding the unique expectations of an American clinical training, and practical advice shaped by decades of mentorship and advocacy for residents and fellows. Dr. Joan, welcome to the Scholars Table.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Khalifa. Thank you for having me. And I appreciate your mentorship to probably hundreds, if not thousands, of your colleagues who appreciate the work that you've been doing here. It's very, very important.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I've been really fascinated about your hands-on involvement in training your residents, providing them with support, um, going to conferences with them. It's really inspiring. So I know we've been trying to make this happen. So I'm really excited that finally we've been able to have time that works for both of us. So before we begin, I always want to go back to the story or where it began. So could you share a little bit about your journey, through medical school all the way to becoming the chief of gastro and, and fellowship program director?
It's an interesting story, and I will try best as I can to condense it. Um, I'm a native New Yorker. I trained at Cornell University Medical School, and I'd have to say I took a rather non-linear trajectory to get from Cornell to where I am now. I originally wanted to be a gynecologist, and then I wanted to be a pathologist, and then finally I ended up in internal medicine and started my training at Beth Israel Hospital in New York City. And there I was fortunate to be mentored, or I should say, come to the attention of my first mentor, who I would call a sponsor. And that concept is very important. A sponsor is somebody who provides you with an opportunity that you realize, maybe in retrospect, is very important to your development. He realized that I had sincere interest in the biology of addictive diseases and connected me with a lab at Rockefeller where I met my the person that would be, I would say, my lifetime mentor, and provided me with the most guidance and opportunities throughout my life to do research as well as professional guidance. Through her, I got grants, had a couple of NIH grants, was doing bench research, animal research, and then I was able to get my fellowship. And I came to my fellowship with my Rockefeller affiliation and research. So during that fellowship, continued to do research, continued to publish, and when I finished my fellowship, actually, I should say before I finished my fellowship, I also came to the attention of another mentor who was doing research in AIDS and gastroenterology. And that person becomes important later in my story. So I leave Rockefeller and St. Luke's Hospital and go on to Connecticut, where I landed a position more in academia as the director of research as part of their small fellowship program at Norwalk Hospital. I advanced there from research director to associate program director to program director. And then at a certain point, I realized that I had to make some money. Academe does not make money.
Yeah.
So I had to make some money to support my children going through college. So I went into private practice for 5 years. Very busy private practice in another hospital, Danbury Hospital in Connecticut. And while I was there at Danbury, my same mentor from St. Luke's that I had done some additional research with called me and said, "What would it take for you to come back to New York? Harlem is looking for a chief."
Mm-hmm.
And by that time, now I had my research experience, I had my program director experience, I had my private practice experience. I was a black woman. I was from New York. It was a job made in heaven. It was made for me.
Yes.
So I came back to New York to be chief of GI and to be program director here at Harlem Hospital.
Hmm. Okay. That's truly sounds like an interesting journey, experience, and I know like throughout your journey, you've led, a lot of people. What principles would you say have guided you in your leadership journey, you know uh, through your medical journey, from research all the way to clinical practice?
I would have to say, fairness and transparency. Um, Also, when you're in a situation, gathering facts and reacting immediately,
Hmm.
not necessarily reflexively, but don't simmer too long on things, because sometimes when we wait to act, we lose opportunities, we lose chances. Also, respect everybody. There are going to be as a medical professional, there are a lot of people in your team. Um, there are the people that clean your office. There are your techs. There are um, your nurses, of course. There are, your fellow physicians, the surgeons that you work with, the pathologists that you work with.
Hmm.
Everybody is essential in what you do. Um, you need to have relationship with everybody. You need to respect everybody. You need to understand what they do. Um, I'm a naturally curious person, and I'm like, well, what do you do, and how do you do what you do? And how can I help you in our relationship? How can I make those specimens better when they're going to pathology? What information do you
Hmm.
need as a surgeon? How do you want me to tattoo the bowels so that you know how to get to the tumor? I mean, there are naturally curious and questioning, and I have, I would say, living my professional life that way. And that, of course, as you're asking the question about my leadership life, but I don't see them as too different. I think the more you know about people and the more you respect people, the more that they will
Yeah.
come to respect you, and appreciate who you are, as you appreciate who they are.
Hmm. Yeah. I have to agree with you on that. I think that is what literally defines who a true leader is. Respect for persons, irrespective of, their role, and also being firm and transparent. I think that is very crucial.
Thing that I would say is to have, and some people have called it an attitude of gratitude. You have to celebrate people, and I think it doesn't necessarily have to be big, but
Hmm.
it should be earnest and appreciative of what they do. And I think that I've tried to do that as much as I can with my residents, with my fellows. Appreciate the work that they've put in, because they do work hard, and I think likewise they appreciate the work I put in. So it's mutual.
Great, great. So I want us to pivot a little bit to one of our main themes for today. Um, that's the residency realities for IMGs. So in your extensive years of experience dealing with residents, both um, local and international, what are some of the most common strengths and I would say blind spots you see in IMG applicants?
I find that the strength of the IMG applicant is, I mean, they do tend to be older, and older because in the countries that they're coming from, they're often required after medical school to do some sort of national service, or there's some other mandatory training that they have to do before they can even think about leaving the country.
Yeah.
The other strength, there's really several strengths. I think there's um, very solid secondary school training, what would here be high school.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's likely to be a lot more solid reading and writing. Um,
Okay.
you'd be you'd be amazed at how many American graduates are really lacking in that category, because writing is not mandatory for most science majors. So that when you have people who say that they want to write, they really can't write. So I find that that's an advantage. The IMGs, now many are, even though they may be great at writing and reading, but a weakness may be speaking. So that
Mm-hmm.
if they're not coming from a country where English is the language,
Mm-hmm.
even though they may be able to communicate on paper very well, they don't communicate in person very well. And I hate to say that's a very big deficit. And it's a deficit because program directors are not only looking for, who you are and how you think, but can you communicate with the patients?
Yeah.
If they're not hearing an accent that seems to be understandable, you're not getting through. No
Mm-hmm.
matter how much they
Mm-hmm.
like you, and they might be admiring of your CV, but if it's a clinical program, that's going to be a big deficit.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that international medical graduates frequently go through a lot in order to get to the United States, and they minimize that journey. And I would say that they need to learn how to articulate that journey.
Mm-hmm.
I've met people who have gone through Russia and Ukraine and learned a different language, learned a different alphabet in order to do training.
Mm-hmm.
Gone
Yeah.
gone to Scotland and Ireland and learned different systems of practicing medicine, Canada, and then come down. I mean, it's such a journey. Those adjustments are really speak to one's resilience, flexibility, ability to adapt. And I find that many IMGs, they kind of gloss over that, and
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know if they think it's not important or if they think it's a bad thing, but it's not a bad thing. But I think that, the IMG has to learn to articulate their story. And you all have a story. And you have to make it compelling. Americans love a story, you
Yeah.
know. Yeah,
That's something
yeah.
we've all learned it the hard way. As international students, when you come, most of the time, we've been told to be modest, and others, misinterpret it to mean, don't talk about your achievements at all. Don't talk about your journey. So people intentionally, keep tense, thinking that at least they will not come out as being boastful or being sharing too much. But as you said, it's the story that defines your journey. So if you're able to articulate it much better, it puts you in a different category. So
It's a
for
fine line. It's a fine line, and
yeah.
I do see some IMGs who will. I've seen this on applications. I trained at the best pediatric blah 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 in my country. I came from the most world renowned professor of this and that. Don't do that. Don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
But just say, I trained at this hospital, that hospital. I went to this country. I went to that country. I learned this language. I learned that language. Just the facts. And the
Yeah.
facts speak for
Mm-hmm.
themselves.
Yeah.
If you have literally gone around the world to get to America, that is impressive in and of itself, without the adjectives.
Okay, that's interesting. So for selection committees, how do they typically view IMG applicants? How differently are they assessed from, say, US graduates?
Um, I would say that, certainly there's a fair amount of bias. There's an assumption that the training is not as good, the training is not as extensive. So there's less tolerance for low grades. There's less
Mm-hmm.
tolerance for um, any little glitches that they might accept from an American medical grad. I mean,
Okay.
if you are coming out of an Ivy League school, or Hopkins, or a you know UCSF, or some big American university, there's an assumption that your level of training is at a certain level that would
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily be assumed if you're coming from the University of Ghana. um, that assumption may not be true, but
Mm-hmm.
that's going to be the bias that exists. So
Yeah.
that puts the IMG at a disadvantage. They have to overcome that assumption that they're coming from a lesser university or
University.
institution.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's interesting. And it's not different from what I've seen over the years. For example, for applicants who even apply to a PhD program, if you had your masters in an institution outside of, say, the UK or the US, most of the time, the trust level is low, so they would rather give you another masters instead of admitting you into a PhD program directly. So that it's it's an assumption that cuts across most of the fields.
Mhm,
um I want us to look at, some of the real issues that, I've spoken to people, sometimes those are the concerns that they raise. How critical would you say is a year of graduation in residency selection process? Is there, like, I've heard people say, oh, there's a cutoff for certain programs. If you've graduated more than this number of years ago, you're automatically out. Don't even apply. Others too says it's a strength. So what really is the impact of the year of graduation?
Yeah, I guess it's sort of a bell-shaped curve, right? You get to a point where it's an advantage because, as I said before, you're an IMG, you're older, you're more mature, you have more, literally more world experience. So you're coming in. It really does make a difference to have an adult in the room, who can look. If you've had to pick up your family and move, thousands of miles, you're in a different category than having your parents drive you down from Boston to start your first job. It's really, it's very different, and that's appreciated. But then on the other hand, you start to get older and you start to get out of touch. An older IMG, the assumption is that you've been out of touch. You may not know what's new. You may have applied a number of times and
Mm-hmm.
still haven't gotten in. So I would say the more competitive the institution, the shorter the time period. Institutions that have a higher number of IMGs would probably be more likely to take people with a longer span. But if
Mm-hmm.
you're looking at some of the very competitive places here in the United States, I think that they're not going to be looking at people beyond 5 years.
Okay. So for applicants who, let's say you've graduated over 5 years ago, um, what are some of the things they can do to stay competitive? Um,
So, I mean, take someone like yourself. You're at Hopkins. So if your masters, you have a masters, you're at a place like Hopkins, you're at a place like Harvard or Yale. Um, hate to say it, but those kinds of masters from those places are going to carry more weight than masters from a smaller college or a smaller university,
mm-hmm.
even though they may be, functionally, an MPH is an MPH. They may be
Yes.
functionally exactly the same thing. But so, if you're stretching your time out, you can stretch your time out perhaps if you're at a Hopkins, if you're at a Harvard, getting your MPH. And then also, what are you doing with that time? Are you doing something very impactful? Um, it's um, I've seen people who have an MPH, and you want to say, well, what did you do with it? Or they have an MBA. Well, so what do I have to show? They say, oh, well,
Yeah.
I started this business that's medically related, and I did this and I did that, and I say, oh, okay, so that's something that's very creative, that's very interesting, that's very innovative. So maybe I want to take a look at this person,
Mm-hmm.
because really what you're trying to do is you're trying to get an interview. You want to be interesting enough that they'll say, well, let me talk to this person
This
and see
person. Mm-hmm.
what they're about. But if you simply have the degree and you haven't done anything with it, then your chances of really getting in the door to get that critical interview is less. It's less.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense. So, I would say those are, let's say, one category of people, right? Those who, let's say, graduated 5 years plus, maybe they are still in a field that is a bit related to clinical practice, so they are still doing practicing clinical medicine. But for those who've been, let's say, in non-clinical roles, let's say after medical school, you joined an NGO and started working for a longer period of time, and then suddenly you notice that, okay, I think I have to go back to clinical practice. For that category of IMGs, what is the way forward for them, or what are their
That's a
chances?
it's a very difficult way forward. Doing uh, shadowing and kind of easing your way back into clinical work and showing that you have been doing that, you really do have to do something that gets you back into the clinical field because um, I mean, I'll go back to myself. I was in academe and then I went to private practice for 5 years, and it was almost too long. I mean, a lot of things had changed in terms of how
Mm-hmm.
you run a fellowship program, and I had a learning curve. I had to re-up, and to get back into it again, even though my CV qualified me to be a program director. So, 5 years was a long time back in 2008. It's an even longer time now,
Yes.
right? You understand what I'm saying? So
Mm-hmm.
if you have missed 5 years of clinical medicine doing something else, um, you're going to have to get back into clinical medicine, and you're going to
Mm-hmm.
have to show me. But again, observerships, working clinically adjacent, in some way in a hospital, and
Okay.
again, hospital medicine is where it's really happening. Office medicine is not. It's just not the same. Hospital medicine is where the science is happening. So that's what I would do if you can get some sort of position, working, in a department. And again, it doesn't have to be the department you want to work in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Surgeons, somebody, the obstetricians need somebody to do something that's clinically adjacent.
Okay.
You want to start doing that.
I think that's really helpful for my older graduates who have been in uh, public health or global health. If you're thinking of going back to clinical practice, then you have to find a way of, you know, gradually creeping into the medical field. I want us to also look at another critical component of the residency journey before it even began. So, how programs view your USMLE and other academic metrics. So, in your experience, I mean, what would you say, or how do USMLE scores impact IMG competitiveness?
So the unfortunate truth is it impacts it a lot. There there's movement afoot to make things pass fail so that you don't really see numbers, you don't really see scores anymore. But as program directors, the one metric that is used to judge us, the success of our program, is board pass rate. So you may have done poorly on your USMLEs because you're just not a good test taker. You may be a great doctor, but you're not a good test taker. The question is, do I want to take a chance on you? Take a chance that you're going to come to my program and then you're not going to pass your boards. And then that's bad for my program.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that unfortunately it's a big deal. um, to fail one of the steps is I don't want to say kiss of death, but it's pretty close to it. And here's the other reason why that's the case. You have to consider yourself out there competing with so many of your fellow international medical grads who have not
Mm-hmm.
failed their steps.
Yes.
So as program directors, we're looking at that first cut. Who are you going to interview and who are you not going to interview? What are criteria that you could use, objective criteria that you could use to just say, I'm not going to, okay, this group of people, I'm not going to interview them. And that
Mm-hmm.
can be absolutely be one of the criteria that you have failed one of your step exams. And it's a very big hurdle to overcome. So I would say people need to be very, very careful when they're taking those exams. Whatever courses they can do to prepare to take those exams, get a good night's sleep if some horrible thing befalls you. And these are stories I have heard. It's just like I went to take. I had a family emergency the night before my exam. I got no sleep, and then I took the exam, and I failed the exam. Well, it's that has to go in your personal statement, by the way. Something
Yes.
like that, has to go, and it really has to be something catastrophic. But that doesn't necessarily save you. A subsequent score that say is above 220, to say when I had all of my sleep, this is what I can do. That will save you. But believe you me, it's a big hurdle to fail.
To
You know,
fail.
low,
Hmm. Hmm.
low failing is worse than a passing low score.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate the transparency and the candidness with how you say it. So I know now step one is like pass fail. It's been like
Mhm.
pass fail for a couple of years now. So it means that your step two CK becomes more important, so to say. But what is typically considered a competitive step two CK score for, let's say, internal medicine? Yes, let's say internal medicine.
Again, above 220, you start to really look great, compared to your comrades. Um, and don't get me wrong, there's some programs that will say, as long as you pass, we're good, because the
Okay,
same thing is true with your boards. When you pass your boards, you don't have to pass with a high score. You just have to pass.
pass.
Uh, you just have to pass, and that's all. That's all we need. And people that consistently pass at the minimum rate will consistently pass.
Hmm.
Um, and some programs will go with that, but it has been shown. There is data to show that the those individuals with higher um, standardized test scores are more likely to pass than those with
Hmm.
lower standard
It's lower.
test.
Okay.
So as a program director, you're also thinking about the things that your program is being evaluated on.
Okay.
So don't think badly of us.
I, I perfectly understand. And I've also heard that for some, I mean, for some select group of applicants, writing your step three before applying to residency also helps, provided you pass your step three. How true is this?
I really couldn't speak to that. I would not say that I'm aware of people saying, do you just have step twos? Do you have step twos and step threes? Um, not taking it and not having a score there is better than taking it and having a bad score there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't know that having more scores is better, but I do think that any bad score is worse than having no score at all.
Okay. So I know you've spoken a little bit about the other elements of your application, but for students who have, say, average score, I think you mentioned that anything above 220, it's okay.
Mhm.
But for students who have, let's say, a lower score, um, what other things can they do to compensate for that?
So, of course, research projects are very important. Publications are important. quality rather than quantity, publications in good journals. Um, and here's the other thing about your research. Oftentimes you maybe you were pipetting in somebody's lab, or you were doing some chart reviews for a much larger study. Your role may not have been that big, but it is important that you know the ins and outs of that study. In other words, you know the background, you know the rationale, you know why that study was being done. Even if you were pipetting all day, that you
Mm-hmm.
need to know, what that mouse model was and what it was trying to define within IBD. You need to know these things. To show that you were actually interested in the research that was there. Can't tell you how many times there, people that just have tons of papers that they were really just they were hangers on.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe their friend was doing something and say, "Hey man, can you put me on your paper?"
Yeah.
And then you see these works and you say, "Oh wow, that looks interesting," and you ask, "Tell me about this," and they're like, "Oh,
Uh,
that." Well, I was just that's a kiss of death. You start your
yeah.
sentence with, "Oh, I don't know that much. Well, I was just this part of it." No, whatever part you were, you
Yeah.
need to be able to articulate what that study was about, what that case report was about, what it was
Yeah.
supposed to teach. So I yeah, I think that research is important. And again, I'll come back to personal statement. Your personal
Okay.
statement is very important. You
Okay.
need to learn how to tell your story. Um, take us People need to visualize you coming from your country, going through your experiences, and coming all the way to America, and what that was like, and the hurdles you had to overcome. Because it's a new concept that's
Yeah.
called that's called distance travel. And distance travel is not just literally distance, but sometimes it is, for example, I'll use an American medical grad. Maybe you're an American student who started off in a community college and
Mm-hmm.
then worked their way up and ended up getting a master's at Hopkins. You know, that is quite a distance travel.
Okay.
Maybe you're coming from a very poor, disadvantaged background, things that you didn't have. You were part of the digital divide. You didn't really have access to a lot of internet and so forth, but still you made it into doing some things with AI. That's quite a distance traveled. So sometimes you have traveled that distance, but you're not aware of it. You need to become aware of those things and then be able to articulate it and to
Okay.
tell a story.
Talk a little bit about another, as you rightly said, one element that is very important. That's a personal statement.
Mhm.
Uh, how can applicants, you know, craft a statement that genuinely stands out in the eye of program directors? What are program directors looking for when they pick up a personal statement and they start reading?
Like I said, we're looking for distance traveled. We're looking for your story. Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
too often people will start off and say, my mother got sick with breast cancer, and then this doctor came and he was wonderful and he did this and he did that and he did the other thing, and I watched him and I said, wow, what a wonderful person. And all I get out of it is like, I want to hire that doctor that took care of your mother. you know, I, I, I know nothing about you.
Yes.
Um, Too much of that. Uh, you know, I do want to know what was your impetus to wanting to be a physician, or your
Mm-hmm.
impetus to wanting to be a gastroenterologist. But don't spend a lot of time talking about other people. Tell me your story and your trajectory, and avoid the adjectives.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was the best. No, no, no. Just what you did should speak for itself.
For
The
yourself,
steps,
yes.
the steps you took will speak for itself. And I'm telling you, a course in creative writing, um, you want your reader to be wrapped with your story.
Mm-hmm.
It does need to sound interesting. I mean, it doesn't need to sound like a newscast. It needs to sound interesting, you know.
Okay. Yeah.
And it's not easy, but it's also not that difficult. So I want to know, what made you want to become a physician. I want you to tell me a story that speaks to your resilience, and then also tell me some stories that speak to how you work, how you care for your patients. Again, like now, and I'm back and forth talking between
Mm-hmm.
residency fellowship, but how you've taken care of your patients, how you've interacted, things maybe that you've done, situations where you felt that you made a difference. Tell me about that, because here's the thing: when I'm reading your CV, I got your scores, I've got your degrees, the things that you've published, but I don't know who you are as a person. I don't know if you're
Yeah.
dependable. I don't know if you're empathetic. I don't know that you work hard. I don't know any of these things unless you tell me those things in some way or form in your personal statement. So I
Yeah.
think people should realize that that's what the personal statement is for. Do not reiterate your CV.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Don't reiterate your CV. Tell me a story. Tell me a compelling story. Even if you might say, well, you know what? I mean, I just came over here from Ghana and I just, I plopped down in Hopkins and it wasn't that hard. I mean, it wasn't that hard. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. But tell me something about something that you've created and how, I don't know, Banda, I'm making this up. It's like I saw a need for, IMGs to have this some education, and I wanted to go about this, but I wasn't sure. And then I had to do this technical thing and that technical thing, and I had to get sponsors, and I had to tell me that story. That's a
Mm-hmm.
story,
Yeah.
you know. That's a story that not everybody has. Something that you've done, you've created. But yeah, I think too often people use their personal statement to reiterate their CV, and everybody's bored, and then they don't get an interview.
That's true. That's true. So I guess that is one common mistake that IMGs do, or even graduate school applicants, like rehashing everything that is on their CV, chronologically, thinking that that makes a great story. But what other weaknesses have you noticed in a personal statement for, say, IMGs? What are some of the common mistakes that you've come across?
Well, one thing is that if you're not strong in English, get it checked. Get it checked,
Mm-hmm.
or use one of these, things online, one of these AI things to check it. Don't let AI write it, but
Write it.
definitely
Mm-hmm.
definitely get it checked so that it reads well, and you don't have spelling errors, you don't have grammatical errors, because again, those things do look badly, and they distinguish you from your colleagues in a bad way,
Yeah.
because there are too many of your colleagues who are well spoken, who write well, who present well. So it's not that those things um, they make you stand out in a bad way. They send you to the bottom of the pile, whereas you otherwise should rise to the top. So that's low hanging fruit. Make sure
Yeah.
your personal statements are spell checked. They're checked for grammatical errors. I think that is something that IMGs will frequently um, not take the time to
Yeah.
make sure it's done.
Okay. So for those who have challenges, or let's say they have gaps in their clinical training, they have lower scores. They failed in one of the steps. Should they like address it directly in
Yeah,
the statement of purpose?
yes, absolutely, absolutely. Address every gap. Explain it. Every bad score. Explain it if you can. If you can, sometimes there isn't an explanation, and that may be even worse. But sometimes there wasn't that terrible accident that happened that kept you up in the middle of the night and caused you to fail that test. But if there is, you should definitely put that in. If there is, I remember there was a young man who, and again, it's an American medical grad, but he had one whole year of terrible grades, and then the grades picked up, and long story short, that was the year that his mother was dying of AIDS, and he had to take care of the
Oh.
whole. And I said,
Mm-hmm.
I said, what? I said, you have to put that in your personal statement. It's like you did all of this
Yes.
and still graduated. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you took care of your family in your youth, and you graduated. I mean, the fact that you didn't have to drop out completely was an amazing thing. But he was thinking, oh, nobody wants to hear that. It's a downer, and he doesn't want anybody pitying him because his mother
Yeah.
passed. And it's like, no, I mean, life happens to people. Life happens to you when you're a resident or fellow,
Mm-hmm.
and your resiliency is shown in a story like that. And we
Yeah.
need people who are resilient.
Okay. Okay. Um, I want us to also perhaps briefly, highlight, let's say, recommendation letters. So, when it comes to recommendation letters, how many is required? Where should the recommendations come from? Should it be from someone, like all of them should be from someone with clinical background, or you could have someone perhaps in, let's say, research or maybe global health?
Um, they should come from, most importantly, someone who knows you well
Okay.
and who likes. And you would think, well, why would you get from somebody who didn't like you? People like to seek out those individuals with titles.
Mm-hmm.
That's a
Yeah.
mistake. That's a mistake. So they're looking for the chair of this the chief medical officer, the this, the that. You need to get a letter from somebody who knows you and who likes you, and preferably someone that you've done a project with who can speak to that project. Also, if you know that that person is a good letter writer, seek that person out, because sometimes I'll get a letter from, it looks like Joe Blow. I don't know who this guy is, but it's a heartfelt, beautiful description of another human being.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Joe Blow is a doctor, and he's like, I worked with Dr. Khalifa, and I will tell you, no one has ever treated my patients with the compassion that he treated my patients. I'm done. I'm there. I want to meet you. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
this guy has sold you. So I think people, I mean, it's true. If I get a letter from somebody that I know, if I get a letter from someone who is famous and who is known, I will look at that letter. Um, if I get a letter from somebody I know, I'm also more likely to call them and say, "Tell me about this guy. Tell me about this gal." But beyond those kinds of, let's call them celebrity letters,
Mm-hmm.
and it's more important to have someone who will tell a story about you. Um, you know, Jane was the first one in. We had a project. It was difficult. We were unclear about the funding, but she still collected the data. She still gathered up the mice. She still, whatever it was that had to be done.
Mm-hmm.
And they were telling the story about that person in the lab and how diligent they were, how dependable they were. So you want the letters to speak to those things again that don't come through in the numbers. Your dependability, your empathy, your value as a human being, your
Mm-hmm.
trustworthiness. So those are the kinds of letters that you want. Those are the kinds of people that you want to write letters for you.
Us to also look at one aspect that is very nerve-wracking. I mean, for I've met students who are preparing for residency interviews and they don't know where to start from. Um, Before we begin, how do the committee decide that we want to give opportunity for this person to interview? If you could like walk us through the major components of the application that you look at before you extend an invitation to someone.
Many of the things that we've already covered.
Mm-hmm.
Your your scores, your pass or fail, um, where you're coming from in terms of schools. One of the things that I didn't mention, and I'll insert it here. Um, if you apply to a program where you know your colleagues have gone, okay, so now program directors are not above thinking now they're an expert. Okay, we've had 5 people from Ghana. We know Ghana.
Mm-hmm.
They don't. We don't, but we think we do. And it's like, this person was good, that person was good. Okay, we're good. We're good with the Ghana pipeline. So
Mm-hmm.
so and I know this is not exactly your question, but just wanted to throw that in to help your colleagues. If you do well, then the program is director. That's an extra plus for the next
Yes.
people coming along. If you know your friend did poorly, I'm sorry. It's a weight. It's a big weight to overcome. So anyway, all right.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
just wanted to put that in. But yeah, so we're looking at scores, we're looking at letters of recommendation, and we're looking at your personal statement.
Okay.
And all of the things that I said about getting an idea of what kind of person you are from the letters of recommendation and from your own personal statement is very important so that it doesn't seem very generic. We are
Okay.
looking at your publications and the quality of them. So those are the things that kind of determine whether or not you'll be called for an interview. And then the interview itself is to confirm or refute that those
Mm-hmm.
things are indeed true,
True.
right?
Okay.
That they are true and that they are indeed correct.
Okay.
And
So,
also basically
mm-hmm.
to make sure you're not a crazy person. I had one,
Yeah.
one of my my colleagues say, no lazies, no crazies. That's it. That's all we need to know.
So do you like I don't know, maybe you don't have the numbers offhand, but what are like the typical numbers that are invited for interview and how many are typically offered a residency slot?
Oh well, my program is very small, so we are interviewing a very small percentage of the people who are applying.
Okay.
Uh, maybe maybe 5-10% of those who are applying, maybe even less,
Mm-hmm.
because there are just so many people, and we have 1 to 2 slots per year.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's very, very selective. And I would say that, one of the reasons why, and it's not unique to the Harlem Hospital program, the in-house residents have an advantage.
Okay.
The in-house residents have an advantage because we know them.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and all of those things that I told you that we're trying to glean from personal statements, that we're trying to glean from letters of recommendation, that you're just trying to guess. You have seen these young people for 2 to 3 years.
3 years.
You,
Mm-hmm.
you have the answers to a lot of those intangibles that you're trying to really estimate from the letters and from the interview. The numbers are similar, but the scale is bigger for internal medicine.
Okay.
Um, the going to most interviews now are virtual, which is a big advantage for both the programs as well as the applicants. We used to have to bring people in and
Yeah.
scheduling. It's crazy, and then it cost the applicant, it cost us. The applicant had to try to arrange all the New York interviews at the same time, and programs didn't interview at the same time. This is much better. This is much better.
Mm-hmm.
um, but I would say that if you're fortunate enough to be called for an interview, of course make sure that you're there early, so that you can set yourself up, check out all of your audio and your video, says, as opposed to my background here, make sure your background is clear, you know, um, and yeah, so that and you should be wearing your nice suit.
Mm-hmm.
You should be well lit, so that your face and facial expressions can be seen. Um,
Okay.
you don't want to look sullen, um, like somebody's forcing you to be there. Um, you also, and it's a fine line. I realize this is, I feel like a director for a movie or something like that, and you just like, well, what am I? How should I be? But
Yeah.
you want Americans are funny.
Yeah.
All right, we're a funny bunch, and it's there's a thin line between being abrasive and just being confident, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and kind of learning that. If you've got some American friends, maybe they will tell you where you fall in that in that very small tolerance of how you come across, because you don't want to put somebody off.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't want to be so meek and so withdrawn that you look like you're depressed. You feel like you're pulling stuff out of people. But
Yeah.
I would also say be prepared to say more.
Mm-hmm.
I always tease my daughter because whenever I give her an answer to a question, she'll ask me a question and I'll give her an answer and she'll say more. you know, and I'm like, that's your favorite expression. But it is something that we do in interviews as well,
Mm-hmm.
because you may have given a one sentence answer
Yeah.
and then and we're like, well, say more.
Say
And
more.
be prepared to say more.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Be prepared to look at the interviewer and say, "Oh, I think I've said enough. I think they've heard enough, so I'll stop."
Yeah.
But have more in your back pocket to say about your research, to say about an interesting case that you've seen, to
Mm-hmm.
say about their program. Do your research. Do your homework.
Mm-hmm.
Know the hospital that you're interviewing with.
Interviewing with.
Right.
Okay.
You know. Yeah.
Okay. So, are there like some common questions that typically comes, or it's, it's open space, anything goes, or there are maybe at least two or three questions that you have to know before you show up? um so for
Right.
example, if you are going for a PhD interview, you have to know the reason for a PhD. So why a PhD, why the school, your research interests. So like in preparing for the residency interview, what are some of the questions that applicants should definitely prepare for?
Tell me about an interesting case.
Mm-hmm.
You gotta have a case. You gotta have a case. You gotta have a case. It has to be teed up. You know. Oh, I saw this lady with blah blah blah. You, basically, it's a
Mm-hmm.
mini presentation. It's a mini presentation. You have to take take us through it. Um, what was done, why it was done, how we came out on the other side with a diagnosis, with a treatment, with a whatever it was that made it memorable to you. But if you're
Okay.
sitting there saying, you're looking up in the sky and there's nothing interesting, bad. That's bad. Two is tell me about your research.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for those people that have these long lists of studies, you better know, or studies or case reports or whatever it is in your CV. You better know every one of them. You, you have to be able to speak like you're giving a mini talk about every paper that you have ever been a part of.
Mm-hmm.
And don't say that, well, that I wasn't really first author, so I don't really know. Kiss of death. Kiss of
Yeah.
death. You have to know. So that's why it's better to be very involved with three or four high quality publications that you can speak to exhaustively than to be peripherally involved with something that wasn't even your idea to begin with.
Yeah. Okay. Well, um, thank you so much. I think we've really gone deep into the issues. But before we end, what is one thing that you wish every IMG understood about the U.S. residency program before they apply?
I would say, um, understand that America cannot survive without international medical graduates. It can't.
Mm-hmm.
It can't. You all are essential. And if America thinks that they can't, they're fooling themselves. The trick is for you is to tell your story and way that sells you. I hate to say it, Americans are into sales and they're into it's like an elevator pitch. You've
Yeah.
got us in the elevator and you've got, you know, 5 floors to convince us that you are the one for us.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it's not natural. It doesn't come naturally to people.
Yeah.
But if you think of it that way, you'll develop that pitch and you'll say, well, this is why I think Harlem Hospital is a great fit for me. I'm this, I'm that, I'm hardworking. You'll start to do it. Practice that in front of the mirror so that you would be you'd be convincing. And there was a question in your that you sent me in my homework that I would like to address, which is sort of a cultural
Yeah.
sensitivity. And I would say, if you can throw in, in my country, there's a saying, such and such.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's great. Not a lot. It's just a little seasoning of your statement, that takes them to where you are and who you are. So think about those things that your parents told you, and that about, and add that to your think about how you're going to add that to your statement. And I think it'll make you stand out, uh, in a way that'll be, they'll say, oh yeah, 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 this guy's from Ghana, he told me about this thing. And Americans like to think they have the inside story, so it's good.
um, okay. Well, I think we've exhausted uh more than 90% of uh, issues. Thank you so much for
it's
making
been a, it's been
um
a pleasure.
yeah, I know how busy you are and how precious your time is. So we truly appreciate your time, and I'm sure our listeners would really be excited about this upcoming episode. So now I have to reach out to Abe and warn him to he's leaving a good impression on the program.
Oh,
And-
listen, Enoch is he's the best. I don't know if he told you. I said to him, "Look, man, you can go anywhere," and he said, "No, I want to stay here." I said, "You can go anywhere," and he said, "No, I want to stay." I said, "Okay." I said, I will take you, but I felt as if I was keeping him from flying to greener pastures. But there's some special things here in Harlem that are endearing.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I truly appreciate the
You're,
time. I
you're
love
welcome.
LinkedIn and showcasing their projects and conferences and actually being at the center of mentorship. So I appreciate you.
And I appreciate what you do. You still need to write that book. I told you needed to write a book, so I'll
Yeah,
I'll, I'll be on I'll be on the lookout for it when it comes out.
I will. I will. Thank you so much for the support and everything. I appreciate
You're welcome. Take care.
it. Take care. Bye.